met Connor one afternoon while looking for a date on Craigslist. Don't hate. Prematch.com and eHarmony. Craigslist was the digital equivalent to the personal ads. I was 36, Connor was 21, and a virgin. The product of two extreme fundamentalist Christian parents, Connor was raised to believe that sex was sacrosanct, meant strictly for procreative purposes, and to be entered into by married people only. Yet, there he was, looking for someone to have sex with on Craigslist. We chatted off and on for several days, and I learned that he had recently begun questioning the moral validity of his parents' teachings. As a junior in college, Connor had been hearing tales of his friends having sex, yet the most he could contribute to the dialogue was that he jerked himself off every night after his roommate fell asleep, while of course feeling guilty about it. Connor's sexual frustration had been building steadily, and the culmination of this frustration, coupled with his faltering faith, had led him to seek some assistance with someone older, someone with some experience, a Mrs. Robinson of sorts. Now, The Graduate made its cinematic debut in 1967, the year of the Summer of Love, and it became the highest-grossing movie of 1968, the year I was born. Benjamin Braddock and Mrs. Robinson, by negotiating a sexual relationship defined not by love, but only an unspoken agreement, symbolized a seismic shift in American attitudes about sex. Now, when I lost my virginity in the late 80s, I hadn't seen The Graduate, but I knew who Mrs. Robinson was. But cultural attitudes had by then regressed. My early sexual experiences, they were tinged with fear. The Surgeon General supplied a congressionally mandated AIDS report to every American household. People were dying, and the degrees of separation between myself and people who were affected became a stark reminder that sex could kill. But while sex was a terrifying proposition, I wanted to do it anyway. Reconciling this fear against my own sexual urges created within me a certain cognitive dissonance. And so did the idea of playing Mrs. Robinson to Connor's Benjamin Braddock. But I wanted to do it anyway. Connor and I met one Sunday afternoon at a hotel. He was sitting at the bar in the restaurant. A few minutes before I arrived, I called his cell and I asked him to order me a vodka tonic. I gave Connor a quick hug, picked up my drink, and gulped it fully before I even sat down. The fear had returned, because while it wasn't my first sexual experience, what was about to happen would definitely be a first for me. Connor, however, was cool as a cucumber. He sort of slumped over the granite bar, all 6 feet 7 inches of him, and watched me as I attempted to contain myself. I ordered another drink, slammed it. We chatted, and my heart, which was pounding, just kept reminding me of my anxiety, so I ordered one last drink. This one I carried with me to the front desk where I checked in, hands shaking, as I grabbed the room card from the clerk without looking her in the eye. We made our way to the elevator as I clutched my drink in one hand and fingered my purse with the other. We stepped inside the elevator. The doors closed. I closed my eyes. What the fuck was I thinking? I took a deep breath and exhaled loudly. Our room was on the 16th floor, so I had a little time to ponder the answer to this question. I looked at Connor. Now, I'm only 5'4", so he towered over me. He was thin and youthful. Before our meeting, our 16-year age difference had not disturbed me in the slightest, but it suddenly felt very consequential and slightly perverse. I realized that our time together had the potential to inform his entire sexual future, and this felt heavy, burdensome almost. But ultimately, Connor and I had both been propagated unrealistic for our time's value sets, at which fear lives at the very heart. But he was ready to walk the path of his own choosing. So was I. So as the elevator came to a stop, Connor smiled down upon me, a very sweet smile, a happy smile, a I'm gonna finally get laid, smile. The doors open, and I saw just a glimmer of terror sweep across his face. And it was in that very moment that my own fear fell away. We stepped out, and I reached a cool set of fingers toward Connor's, and together we walked down the hall, hand in hand. Perhaps we were propelled forward by the understanding that fear and sex don't have to be inextricably linked. Inside the room, Connor got undressed first. He stretched out along the bed wearing only his boxers. His feet, they dangled off the end of the bed, a giant awaiting sexual tutelage on an undersized bunk. I giggled a little, and he smiled warmly. I began to shed my clothing. I was wearing a simple white bra and panty set underneath my jeans and tops, and so I left them on. It was springtime, and I was California tanned. Connor spoke then. "A very nice choice of underthings, Sadie. You are radiant." This really sweet sentiment made me smile and encouraged me further. So I climbed across the king-size bed where he lay, and I began to kiss him. His kisses were clumsy, full of uncertain deliberation and over-intention, but I was patient. I offered him muted instruction as his hands found their way quickly to my breasts. The gentle intimacy of this began to turn me on. I decided it was time to undress him fully, so I made my way down toward the end of the bed, grabbed his boxers, sliding them off in one easy motion. And his cock was long and thin like he was. And it had the same qualities of innocence and apprehension that his face possessed. I slipped off my bra and panties, then pulled a condom from my purse and unwrapped it. He took the lead in putting it on, telling me that he'd practiced many times. Once the condom was secure, he plunged inside of me. Awkwardly, I asked him to slow down, realizing his future partner's feelings and requirements were just as critical as his own was the most important lesson that I could impart. And Connor was an excellent student. He listened intently, not only to my words, but to my body, as I shifted my pelvis up towards his. And then together we found a rhythm that suited us both. It felt quite nice. So with each thrust, I moaned. Connor made not a sound. After a little bit, we decided that I should be on top because this position allows me to happily command my own orgasm from a glorious and productive perch. Connor watched me as I did exactly that, and with an abandon that frankly surprised me. Any residual fear was exorcised, my entire being convulsed. A muffled wail escaped my lips. Ah! I worried that Connor might be dismayed to see me in such a state, but he only stared at me, glassy-eyed, entranced, without making a sound. "Connor, when you're about to come, please tell me, okay?" "Okay." And it was at that very moment that I observed his face change once again. This time it was not fear. It was the brightest, shiniest, sweetest indication of his approach. Connor was about to come. "Okay!" And with that one word, "okay," Connor stopped moving. His whole body tensed. Reading his request, I stopped moving too and sat down hard against him and simply watched. His face, so young and innocent, revealed nothing but pure pleasure. I saw no fear in the smooth contours of his jawline. There was no guilt etched into the tiny creases of his closed eyes, and not a single solitary sound slipped from his lips. And so it was that quietly, Connor was a virgin no more. And me, in this wild Mrs. Robinson fantasy come true, I had finally fully let go of both my fear in relation to sex and the subsequent guilt of my own desire. But Connor had trusted me to help usher him through a very personal and transformative experience to act in his best interest as well as my own, and to do so gracefully and with respect. He trusted me, and trust is the opposite of fear. So it seems that we were both in the right place at the right time, on Craigslist, looking for a date, looking for sex, but in the end, we both got so much more. Thank you.